And so what they had to do is they had to lie. They had to tell the women they were impregnating with the eggs fertilized by a chimpanzee sperm. They had to lie and say they were just doing an examination and just health examination or something. Today they are still trying. Why were they trying back then? Because this would prove evolution. If you can breed humans and chimps, this would prove evolution. And they said that's why. And today they got pretty much the same reason for trying this. Except there are still the major ethical problems, but I don't think you'd ever have a conception that was viable. So you never know, but breeding eagles and apes, and there's Hamanzi, and they combine us.
Guy's a genius.
Welcome everyone to Project Nihilist. This is supposed to be part 3 of a 3-part series breaking down this lecture about abortion from Dr. Jerry Bergman, who has 7 postgraduate degrees, taught all of the science classes at university level, consulted for 2 government agencies and 2 Nobel Prize winners, including the guy who invented transistors. And in the last 10 years, he's testified as an expert witness or consulted on over 100 court cases. Before we get into the last part of this lecture, part 1 has gone the way of Old Yeller. My phone glitched. I lost my entire library. Totally sucked. Talk about feeling sick, man. I had a couple videos ready to go, and I think they were some of my best yet. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's pick up right from where we left off.
Someone was telling me about, who was it? About, they had mentioned that she was taking a class, and they mentioned in the class that the procedures for abortion, and she mentioned this to somebody else, and they kicked her out of the class.
Oh, the old so-and-so was kicked out of Abortion 101 class for talking. Jared doesn't remember who it was or any of the details, but it's so vague that it probably definitely happened.
And you hear that. I got in trouble at the college where I taught now I tactfully presented this, but I didn't want to lie to students. But on the other hand, you really can't honestly convey the pro-choice position with a straight face.
Dr. Jerry taught all of the science classes at university, and he lacks the mental bandwidth to realize his students were probably pissed off because he wasn't teaching, science class, and instead used his position as a pulpit to teach his dogmatic rhetoric.
With a straight face. You either have to lie or be ignorant. I wasn't ignorant. So the college didn't appreciate my presenting this information here.
Like this information here? Come on, Jerry, it was exactly this information. You were probably telling your chemistry students that evolution is fake and the universe is 6,000 years old and Jesus wished it all into existence out of nothing.
Okay, saline, that's salt, or they use some salt solution. They inject that with amniocentesis needle into the amniotic fluid. The baby breathes and swallows and dies about an hour later of acute salt poisoning.
Jerry likes to paint a vivid picture of abortion as an attempt to make it all about emotions, outlaw it, even if it's incest, rape, or a threat to the mother's life, which he doesn't mention once in this hour-long lecture.
And we know that's a horrible way to die. The mother then delivers a dead, burned baby. And the use has declined because the dangers for the mother and sometimes the baby does survive. So we have some cases where the baby survives.
It was paradise until they came.
And that was the situation with Gosnell. The baby survived, and of course, the doctor can be sued.
I played a clip from that Gosnell movie in a separate part about a serial killer who botched abortions and killed his failures after they were born. Jer never talked about the reality of why this is so horrible. He just says, how do we know everyone ain't doing this stuff? And they are trying to legalize post-birth abortions because all the doctors suck at their job or something.
Because you went to the doctor for an abortion, you have a baby, that's a lawsuit. I was driving over here on the turnpike. I noticed how many ads were for lawyers. You have a motorcycle, somebody hits you, we'll sue for you. And so how many ads? So, it's a way lawyers can make money. I mean, lawyers make money by suing.
I don't believe it. You're meant to come down here and defend me against these characters, and the only one I've got on my side is the blood-sucking lawyer.
Jerry always draws the most irrelevant lines possible, as if being run over on a motorcycle parallels medical malpractice of botched abortions, followed by murder, for Christ's sake.
So that's a major way they make money. And so therefore, what Gosnell did, and he explained why, which you could understand, if the baby was born alive, he killed it. And that is, my guess is that's not rare. We don't know how common because that's not recorded. And that's why in some states, they want to make it legal to kill the baby after it's born, because that would protect the doctor in those cases. And therefore, he wouldn't have to worry about that.
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Again, Jerry's just making shit up. He doesn't care about lying to uneducated fools. His goal is to deceive people and at the end somehow justify the means.
The dilation, and you dilate the cervix, and extraction, used after 13 weeks when the baby is somewhat developed. And then you dilate the cervix, and then you bring forceps, which look like pliers, and then you seize a leg, you twist it and tear it off, and then you twist off and tear off as much of the baby as you can, and hopefully you get it all out. The skull is a problem because it's large enough where it doesn't go through the cervix very well. So you have to crush the skull and then pull the parts out. And then reassemble them and make sure they've all removed so you don't leave part of the child in the mother's body, which can cause a problem like infection and partial birth abortion.
Jared calls it a baby because he wants to trick your brain so you become emotionally attached. If a fetus is unviable because it doesn't have a brain, lungs, kidneys, or a heartbeat, what's his plan? Make the mother carry it to term and squeeze out a stillbirth? Or what? Have a cesarean? We should talk about the reality of it, but no, Jerry just pretends it's murder. Darwin tried to murder God. Darwin was God murder.
We have to accept the fact that we all have a serious problem.
It's very clear that Darwin's goal was to murder God. Those are his words. How do you murder God? You destroy the reason people believe in God. Why do people believe in God? Partial birth abortion through the 4th through the 9th month. Use ultrasound to locate the baby's legs so you can then find the parts and pull them out without a major problem.
And if we ever want to get out of here, the first step is to admit it.
Jerry's supposed to be a teacher imparting knowledge and wisdom. He doesn't teach us jack about partial birth abortions, what they are, how they've been banned for 20 years, and we're only ever a fraction of a percentage of them, and how they're medically necessary in some situations like miscarriage and congenital defects. And then scissors I used to puncture the base of the back of the skull to crush it, and then to pull it out. Margaret Sanger, talked about her. She was the woman who stressed birth control as well as abortion.
Say what? Dude's crazy.
And the reason she did is because Margaret Sanger is well known for her many lovers.
You are suffering a breakdown. Now stop. Hammer time.
Oh, your God, we're back to this shit again. Jerry is obsessed with Margaret Sanger. A huge part of this lecture has been him telling half-truths about people who died a long time ago and blaming them for our problems today.
H.G. Wells and many famous people were lovers of Margaret Sanger. She liked men, which nothing wrong with that, that's fine.
Roll with the flow. It is said if you can't rule the list, then you probably are dead. So wave your hands in the air.
Oh no, how dare us humansies have relationships and try to connect with people that Jerry doesn't approve of. He doesn't know if they were doing the nasty and the pasty. They might have been friends, but Jerry is an ignorant teenage girl spreading rumors trying to destroy someone's reputation, probably because he's fucking jello.
But when you like lots of men, that's a problem. And that was a problem for her, and so she basically campaigned against birth control, for birth control, so that would reduce the problem of children born of this union.
Nothing someone says before the word but really counts.
But she stressed at the end of her movement was to produce a superior race by evolution. She was an evolutionist. She said she founded Planned Parenthood, which is still around today, and to eliminate what she thought were inferior races. And that wasn't a small category. Orientals, Jews, and blacks were inferior races. So she had a lot of people to work on getting rid of.
And while doing some evacuating of my own, I was left behind.
I don't have to like everything about a woman who grew up in the early 1900s. Hell, if I'd have been born then, I'd have probably been a racist, homophobic, bigot, misogynist too. If I reasoned through life like this, I could say Christianity is full of terrible, dead people. Let's shit on them and outlaw it.
and she referred to them as human weeds. Okay? And her father was a village atheist, so she got some of these ideas from her father. She died as an alcoholic and a drug addict, very sadly in the United States, alone and without family. She had 2 children, but she didn't tend to have much time for her children. She was too busy traveling the world, having sex with famous men, and lecturing about eugenics and birth control. Anyways,
Jer shits on Marge's father a couple of times, and how dare he immigrate to the U.S. and fight in the Civil War at age 15 as a drummer and become a stone cutter, carving angels and saints on headstones, advocating women's rights and free public education for everyone. The son of a bitch, Darwin murdered God. Anyway, on to Jerry's next slide that he has to read off of a television screen because this presentation was put together by a creationist propaganda mill called ICR that Jerry works for. This stupid slide quotes page 8 from some uncited book hell-bent on destroying the woman's reputation and legacy, obviously not interested in the truth, and for fuck's sake, maybe she died alone in an alcoholic and drug-riddled stupor at the ripe old age of 87. Even if all that's true, what's it got to do with birth control and abortion today?
Sanger charmed the black community's most distinguished leaders into acceptance of her plan.
No, she didn't. Jer's talking about a sentence from her speech that says something dumb. He wants us to believe her ludicrous plan reached fruition. It didn't.
Which was designed to their own detriment. Genetically inferior was what she called these people. The need for birth control in America and Birth Control Facts and Reproductive in 1995 is the source of this quote.
I went and read Marge's speech titled A Way to Peace, 1932. It's an interesting read. It sounds batshit crazy to me. A couple years later, Hitler would come to power. For all I know, she prefaced this with, picture this. Imagine what it'd be like if this happened. Doesn't come across like that.
She said such a plan, that called the Negro Project, would reduce the birth rate among the diseased, the sickly, the poverty-stricken, the antisocial classes, elements unable to provide for themselves, and the burden of which they are all forced to carry, or we are forced to carry.
You can do it, it's all up to you, okay?
I guarantee Jerry's one of those idiots who bitch about people mooching off the system. Sanger's like, here's a shitty way we can stop that from happening, and lots of people obviously agreed and still do, but they like to pretend to their cults that that's not what the ultimate outcome of their non-strategy is. In Jerry's fucked up world, everything will just work out if we let nature take its course unencumbered.
With a little plan, you can change your life today.
And she said the most merciful thing the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. Okay?
Follow my plan and very soon you will say.
Marge talked about things like population growth, immigration, hereditary diseases, mental and physical, and because she was born over 100 years ago, her knowledge was limited and affected by the culture she grew up in. You know, a time when most of society was racist, xenophobes, you know, like Jerry and his ilk.
We don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. That wouldn't be good. So that's why they wanted to work through the preachers, through the ministers.
Ministers more sinister than ministers. It's easy, okay?
Fine, she's the shittiest person to ever exist. She's burning in hell, and we should ignore her good ideas just because she had some bad ones too. By Jer's logic, we should ignore Newtonian mechanics because he thought he could turn lead into gold and make the elixir of life. This is the level of intellect we're dealing with here.
And I gave this presentation in a black church a few years ago, and came up to me afterwards, the minister, and said, that's interesting, but I'm aware of that. For example, in a church that he just spoke at, a black church a few months earlier, a woman was pregnant and she wanted an abortion, and so the church raised the money to pay for her abortion. The church raised the money to pay for her abortion. And he just sat there and thought, that's a problem.
And no sooner than she did, their cave was destroyed.
Let's say that's all true and we don't know anything about the circumstances involved. Recently, a woman was denied an abortion in Florida. An ultrasound showed her wanted baby would die after birth. A side effect was low amniotic fluid that caused it to be totally painful. Her child, who knew what pregnancy was and where babies come from, and then months later, we get to take mom to the hospital to give birth to your dead sibling. Instead of accepting the hard truth, we make it as miserable as possible in the entire family. And then there's this fucked up, well, Jesus needed another angel in heaven. Let's have a funeral and cry over some spilt milk and put the mother at risk of not being able to have any more babies and possibly dying from this shit.
Everyone had to go on this long, sucky walk with some weirdo they met and die.
We all know that not all Christian churches are Christian.
You know, that's interesting because Jerry's one of the most judgmental son of a bitches you'll ever see. No Christian could stand in front of his benevolent judgment and pass his ridiculous test. Margaret Sanger, she was a church-going Christian till she died. Like most of the Christians he shitted on in this lecture, Jerry, his mom and dad, they were all atheists, and he's surrounded by enemies. They're all around him. They're everywhere.
You're melding two things together that really don't fit together. They're called theistic evolutionists. And theistic evolutionists are often simply evolution, the core, with a thin coat around the core of Christianity. And you see this a lot in the world. And there's a few good churches around here. This is a very good church. So if you attend it, you should be proud. You got two good pastors you had, the previous one and the current one. You have some good pastors to help you understand this stuff. But to me, it's amazing that they should be aware of this, that indeed, this is what Margaret Sanger wanted to do. If they read my book, sorry, they'd be aware of this, because I have a whole chapter on that.
Where do you get these great ideas?
Since I don't have a brain, they're coming from my stomach down deep below and then up again into my mind.
Oh no, not a whole chapter again. He's got bullet points. Remember, read his books. Don't read her books. You don't want to fuck up and make that mistake. Read his books. They'll tell you to hate her and life will be okay. And you can sleep at night. Oh, wait till the next part when you can't sleep at night.
Really pathetic. Apes turn into people? Right.
That's not my coaching hand here. Yeah.
I don't want to mention his sexual practices because I don't want to gross you out. I want you to be able to sleep tonight, but they were pretty gross.
Oh, that's sweet. Jer wants us to sleep at night, and then he goes on to say this guy filmed himself having gay sex with his students, that he was into S&M, bestiality, adultery, that he encouraged pedophilia. Man, these are some dark fucking days. I still can't believe he said some Christians are candy-coated shards of glass covered in hot sauce. I mean, why didn't he just say they're lukewarm and he spews them out? I mean, hit it home, dude. There's no need to beat around the bush.
And here are some of her words. Actually, we have her own manuscripts. And first step would be to control the morons, the mentally deficient, epileptics. The second would be to take an inventory of such groups as illiterates, paupers, etc., and we need to kill them.
This is from a speech, numbnuts, not a manuscript. And she never talked about killing anybody. Forced sterilization? Yeah. Labor camps? Yeah. But she never talked about killing anybody, you dipshit. She never performed abortions either and saw abortions as a necessary evil, a way of protecting women.
This is an interesting man. He was a Russian scientist. And what he was trying to do was basically prove evolution. And he was trying to do that by breeding a primate, a gorilla or a monkey, and a human.
For some reason, Dr. Jerry's going to talk about this dude who perfected horse artificial insemination where a stallion could get 500 mares pregnant in a life rather than like 20 to 30 or whatever. He was banned from the Soviet Union for trying to get 3 chimpanzees pregnant with human male sperm. Not what Jerry's about to lie about ahead. He was exiled, for Christ's sakes, where he died. This shit just makes no sense to me. If we're going to talk about the guy, let's talk about the truth, what actually happened. And of course his attempts failed. We know why they failed. Correction, he returned to the Soviet Union, tried to organize this shit. His last orangutan died, citation needed.
Okay. And they argued, by the way, this was 60 years ago. But just last year, Professor Barish, who was at the University of California.
I don't edit anything out, and we went from Ivan to this dude David in a sentence fragment. And David Bross is a psychologist, and the only people talking about his thought experiment are these creationist propaganda websites.
Human and chimpanzee hybrid could be produced in a laboratory. After all, human and chimp, or bonobos, share by most estimates roughly 99% of their nuclear DNA.
Oh yeah, that nuclear DNA stuff. We gotta be specific when we're talking to this audience of intellect who clearly know the difference between RNA and gametes. Let's not cry over spilled milk. Let's just round it up to billions and billions.
Well, the number is closer to 85%, which is a chasm between us and humans. You're talking about almost 500 million genetic differences.
Billions and billions and billions and billions
between humans and chimps.
Can you guess how Jerry's going to put this deep intellectual conversation to bed? If you said evolution was fake because he wouldn't fuck a chimpanzee, you hit the nail on the head.
And by the way, it doesn't take much when you look at her and her. I have no problem identifying which is which.
See, I got ideas. I got thoughts.
I mean, she looks like a girl, and he looks like, or she looks like a chimp.
I call this a snapshot.
He looks like, or she looks like a chimp. So, no problem. And they really were thinking about the ethical implications. If we breed this, they call it Humanzi. If we breed this Humanzi, do they have human rights? Should we have affirmative action for Humanzis? How do we treat the ethical implications of this union?
Yeah, try to keep up.
Just recently, we made human-monkey hybrid embryos in a lab called chimeric embryos with zero intention of letting them mature. Jerry's likely one of these idiots who want to give human embryos human rights, farther infringing on other people's rights by denying them medical care that is useful in procreating, a thing Jerry says he's all about. But he's fucked up in the head and thinks like the village idiot, and because he's religious, for some fucked up reason, people listen to him.
And interesting, in one of the German colonies, the scientist wanted to breed, and he wanted to breed the chimps in Africa with the blacks in Africa. And the German government said no.
Again, Jerry's not going to cite what he's talking about. He's just going to pull it out of his ass, tell everybody it's a chocolate bar, because most likely he's talking about the Soviet Union or possibly China or some shit back 100 years ago. And he wants us to believe that it was Germany because he's obsessed with Nazis. He goes on in every part of this lecture about Nazis. I'm surprised he's not been bitching about Nazis in this video.
The German government, now this is before World War II, the German government says no. We're trying to help the population. We're trying to work with the blacks. The Africans. We're trying to help the population, and this is going to get in between us and what we're trying to do to help these people before Hitler. And so what they had to do is they had to lie. They had to tell the women they were impregnating with the eggs fertilized by a chimpanzee sperm. They had to lie and say they were just doing an examination and just health examination or something. But it may not surprise you to realize that none of them worked.
Jerry can't get a single fact right. The story goes a guy tried to fertilize 3 female chimps using male human sperm, and the dude wasn't even German. But who cares about the truth when the lie sounds better? Of course it doesn't work. We know why. Also, they pulled it off in a lab, dum-dum.
Been unable to breed the two, and this does not stop people from trying. In fact, today they are still trying. Why were they trying back then? Because this would prove evolution. If you can breed humans and chimps, this would prove evolution. And they said that's why.
We are great apes, you idiot, and we don't need to be able to reproduce with another species to prove evolution. It's already abundantly clear to us, especially those of us who took biology. Thank God we never had to take it from you.
You never know, but breeding eagles and apes, and there's Humanzi, and they combine us. Ivanovich, first person to attempt to create a human-chimp hybrid by artificial insemination.
I almost feel sorry for him. You never know, but breeding eagles and apes, and there's Hamanzi, and they combine us.
No, I don't.
Oh yeah, we humans ain't apes because we tried to fucking the monkeys and we can't reproduce, man. We can't make the Libras or the Zertles or the crocoducks. Man, that proves evolution and fake, just like Haeckel's drawings. This fucking guy, this Sid is so retarded. Like I can't even believe he's actually saying some of the stupid shit he's saying. This is probably where I'm going to end part 3. And I'm actually going to make a part 4 because I'm telling you, this shit gets even worse. Like, it's all fucking downhill from right here. I promise you.
Failed, as far as we know. Failed. Kinsey, Professor Alfred Kinsey, the father of the modern Western sexual revolution, he was himself very promiscuous. And I don't want to mention his sexual practices because I don't want to gross you out.